Well, it is Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to the moms out there. And I don't know if you knew this or not, but in America, the crime rate on Mother's Day is always substantially lower than any other day. And most people think, well, it's because all the families are getting together. I think it's because all the crime moms are like occupied with lunch, so they can't be out doing their stuff. You know, they're kind of like, oh, I have to take a day off and be with family. So, hey. It is Mother's Day, and it seems odd to be talking about discouragement on Mother's Day, doesn't it? I mean, discouragement is one of those things that we all feel like everybody can relate to it, even if you can't really exactly put it into words. You kind of know what it is. You have felt it before. It's not foreign, but it may be that nobody knows discouragement better than moms, because moms live a little bit of a different life than everyone else, and you begin to think about it, and it doesn't just apply to parents, but there's something unique about it. The sleepless nights, the constant crying, the upset stomachs, the questions that never stop, the complaining, the difficulty, the temper tantrums, and that's just the dad, right? You still haven't even gotten to the children yet, and then teenage hormones, and they're making dumb decisions and all this stuff. And it just, as a mom, it just wears on you. It makes you tired. It's difficult. It's hard. It pushes you physically, mentally, emotionally. It costs a lot to be a mom. And you kind of, again, just speaking to moms, you know that you want them to grow up and get launched and go on, but you also want to keep them young. And sometimes you feel so alone, and other times you would love to just have a few minutes alone. It kind of continually goes back and forth, back and forth. And every parent, mom, dad, whatever, everybody that's responsible for a child kind of feels a low-key sense of desperation. And the reason they do is because you know this. You know that they're eventually going to go make their own decisions. And you've already seen them make some decisions. And you know they're going to make some bad ones. And you know they're going to make some wrong ones. And in the back of your mind, you're constantly rehashing what we did as parents, what we're doing right now, what is going to come in the future. And you can't help it, but you feel a little sense of maybe falling short, or that you're over your head a little bit. And it's hard. And then you go to sleep and you get up and you do it again the next day. Because that's what it is to be a parent. And that discouragement thing, it's real, and it comes, and like I said, it's kind of difficult to put into words, but let me give you a visual, and you tell me if this looks like somebody that's discouraged, because I see this every once in a while when I walk down our hall and somebody's sitting at their desk and they don't know anybody's looking. Right? That's discouragement. It's not working. And that's what discouragement is. Discouragement is when you want things to be a certain way and they're not, and there's not much you can do about it. That's what real discouragement looks like and feels like. And one of the things that discouragement does is it's kind of sneaky. We're so used to it, we just kind of keep going, right? Like, we're kind of discouraged, we're a little disappointed, maybe even a little depressed, and we just kind of have to keep going, because what else are you going to do? You got to keep at it. You got to keep moving. And meantime, discouragement is like that weird subscription on your checking account, and you don't know how it got there, and every month it's hitting you for $19.99, and you're like, I don't know what this is. I don't even know how to stop it. I don't know how I started it. And it's just chipping away at me, and that's what discouragement does. We got to deal with it. We have to deal with discouragement. You can't just ignore it. You can't just push through it, because it's a concealed emotion, and it costs you some things. But dealing with concealed emotions actually keeps you from creating accidents. And that's why it's important to take discouragement head on and recognize it and realize it. Okay, random question has nothing, well, it does have something to do with stuff, but for the moment, it doesn't have anything to do with anything. How many of you know, either in your life, in your family, a sister, an aunt, a mom, a child, whatever, you know a Hannah, somebody named Hannah? Okay, yeah, it's a pretty common name. And we're actually going to talk about one of the first Hannahs and what happened in her life and how God did something amazing that helped her move from being discouraged to having courage. And we read about it in 1 Samuel chapter 1. If you've got a Bible, you want to follow along in the app or in your copy of the Bible, it's 1 Samuel chapter 1. And Hannah lived in this weird time, and it's actually kind of a weird time, like our time is a weird time. If you look back and you realize, you know what, the world is different than when I grew up. Things have changed a lot. And you kind of look forward and you think, I don't really know if we've settled on what we're going to be and who we're going to be as a people. That was Hannah's world. Things had changed quite a bit since she was a kid. Things were kind of in motion right now. And as she looked forward, she kind of felt like, well, things aren't exactly the way they're going to be just yet. The sociologists call it a liminal space. You're somewhere in between. You're trapped between the old ways that you know and the changes that are happening and the new thing that's going to show up. And you're kind of caught somewhere in the middle. And that's where Hannah was. And I think it's appropriate because so many of us are in that same place. For Hannah, her discouragement, though, did not come because she wasn't connected to her God. Her family was deeply connected to God. In 1 Samuel 1, you find out that Hannah's discouragement comes from an entirely different source. 1 Samuel chapter 1, and there's going to be some names and places. Don't get hooked up on that. It said there was a certain man from Ramathaim, a Zuphite from the hill country of Ephraim. So you guys should all know exactly where he's from and what his deal is. Whose name was Elkanah, the son of Jehoram, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph. Okay, now we know his whole family line. He was an Ephraimite. He had 2 wives. One was called Hannah, and the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had none. And right out of the gate, you begin to see where Hannah's discouragement came from. She was battling infertility. And in that battle, it had become very difficult and very discouraging. But even before we get to that, there's something we gotta look at. You know, it said that Elkanah had 2 wives, which is one too many, right? And I mean, it is funny, but it's not even just funny. Every time we see people in the Bible that have 2 wives that basically take God's plan and try to add on to it, try to change it, try to switch it, or in our context, my life's not going the way I want, so I'm going to take control of it. I'm not going to wait on God. I'm not going to follow God's direction. I'm going to take charge of it. Every time we see people grab hold of something, things start going sideways. It starts causing problems. Most scholars think that probably what happened was Elkanah had married Hannah and she didn't have children. And so after waiting a while, he decided, well, I guess I better marry somebody else to have children. And so he brought in a second wife. You don't have to be a marriage counselor to know this is not going to go well, right? I mean, this is not going to be a good situation. And then you add to it the infertility that Hannah's already dealt with. And it's not an uncommon problem. It's still a problem today. Did you know 1 in 6 couples that want to have children fight some form of infertility? It's very common. Couples over 35, it's 1 in 3. This is a real ongoing problem. And people say, the studies that study emotional pain, they say the pain of infertility is actually the same kind of pain that somebody experiences when a marriage ends in divorce or somebody gets diagnosed with a life-threatening illness. It is that deep and that desperate of a pain. And so here is Hannah with her family, and then another wife, and that other wife is having children, and she is not. And you can see right out of the gate why she would be facing a discouraging situation. And you'd like to think that was all she had to deal with, but it wasn't, because if you look at verse 3, it gets worse. Year after year, this man went up from his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh, where Hophni and Phinehas, the 2 sons of Eli, were priests of the Lord. Whenever the day came for Elkanah to sacrifice, he would give portions of the meat to his wife Peninnah and to her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion because he loved her, and the Lord had closed her womb. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. This went on year after year. Whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival provoked her until she wept and would not eat. Her husband Elkanah would say to her, Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons? You read that and it's probably the wrong reaction. But there's everything in me that just wants to put that snotty Peninnah in her place. You know what I mean? It's like, you're beating up on our girl. There's no reason for that. And you just kind of want to put her in her place. Moms, especially, again, you know the pain of comparison. Because what happens when we compare? When we're discouraged and we start comparing, do we ever compare to people that we're doing better than? No. We always choose people that are ahead of us. And we start wondering, how come she's so fit? How come her kids are doing so well in school? How come her and her husband seem so close? Who does she think she is feeding her kids 3 times a day, right? I mean, we always start kind of comparing. I thought it was funny. We always start comparing, and we wonder, and what happens is in our discouragement, we compare to somebody that seems like they have it going better, and it just deepens what was already hard. In Hannah's case, she didn't have to compare because she had a rival in her ear all the time about how she was falling short and not good enough. There's a couple of things that happen with discouragement, and maybe you've experienced this. There's really kind of two levels. The first level of discouragement is, we talked about frustration a few weeks ago, and discouragement and frustration are kind of like cousins. They can get really, really close. But again, you're going back to that idea, things are not the way I want them, and there's very little I can do about it, and it's not unusual to start to get frustrated. Because we try a few things, even though we know we're not able to do anything about it, or we get just despondent and discouraged because we can't do anything about it, and we start to get bitter. Again, we also talked about bitter, but we become bitter and we miss something. We miss how the people around us love us. Elkanah loved her and was trying very hard to show that to her. But in her discouragement, she missed it. But that's just kind of level one, right? That's almost low-level discouragement. I get frustrated, I get a little bit bitter, and what it kind of costs me is a lot of times I don't appreciate, I don't show gratitude for, I don't even necessarily return the love in the relationships where other people are loving me because I'm discouraged. That's another cost of discouragement. But level two is a lot deeper. Level 2 discouragement is heartbreak. It's a family that blew up. It's a child that's gone prodigal and isn't coming back. It's a divorce that nobody saw coming. It's the inability to have children. It's loving an addict that can't seem to get past their struggles. It's devastating. And what happens when we get to that place of discouragement and heartbreak is it starts to mess with who and what we trust, and it kind of attacks our identity. We lose trust, and our identity is attacked. And suddenly we start listening to and believing lies. And here's how some of them go. God is mad at me. God doesn't love me like he loves them. God is punishing me. For some reason, God has left me. And we start to believe those lies, and we start to think they're true, and we start to kind of formulate all these stories that attack our identity and tell us we're not who God tells us that we are. And for some of you, this may be the reason you're here today. Because I need to tell you something. If you've hit that moment of heartbreak because of your discouragement, the lies you are being told, they're not true. I don't know why the circumstances are the way they are. I don't know why the thing you want you can't seem to change and there's nothing you can do. But I don't know why, and I wish I did. But I do know this. God is for you. He absolutely loves you. You are his daughter. You are his son. And he will not leave you. He is good, and he has good for you. And if you are in that spot, sometimes that's the thing you have to hold on to. Because the discouragement wells up and it seems so big. And the lies come and it gets so hard to have hope. But he is for you. And this was the turning point for Hannah. This is when things began to change. Look at verse 9. Once, when they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh, Hannah stood up. Now Eli the priest was sitting at his chair by the doorpost of the Lord's house. In her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. And she made a vow, saying, Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head. And as she kept on praying to the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. And Eli thought she was drunk. And he said to her, how long are you going to stay drunk? Put away your wine. Pause there. I don't know what kind of church this was, but it was different than ours, okay? So just, yeah. I'll never call you drunk if you look like you're praying. I don't know, yeah. Verse 15, not so, my Lord, Hannah replied. I'm a woman who is deeply troubled. I've not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of my great anguish and grief. And Eli answered, go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him. She said, may your servant find favor in your eyes. And she went her way and ate something, and her face was no longer downcast. She got up, literally. She got up and did something. And that's so important because when we are in that place of discouragement, especially heartbreaking discouragement, all we want to do is curl up in a ball and shut everyone and everything out and just kind of go away and be left on our own. And she didn't do it. She did the opposite, and she probably didn't feel like it, but something told her, the thing I need to do right now is I need to get up, I need to go, I need to pray. I need to pour out what has been stored up in me. The anguish, the grief, the frustration, the bitterness, the heartbreak, the struggle, the discouragement. And I need to pour that out to God, and you are just the same. When you're fighting discouragement, the best thing you can do is go to God and pour out your soul in prayer. It's what Hannah did. It's a prescription for all of us. When the discouragement level is high, it is a call to go and pray. And I know that's not what you want to do. And I know that's not what your first thought is sometimes. And I know you would rather stay away and kind of sit in quiet and simple silence. But the way you attack discouragement is through prayer. You pour your soul out in prayer. And I love Hannah's prayer. Because it wasn't, and if you just look at it very closely, it almost looks like a deal. Like she's kind of saying, well, God, if you will, then I will, and let's kind of make a deal. And maybe she's going to kind of manipulate God. But if you look at it very closely, what she was actually saying was, it was a prayer of faith. She said, God, whatever you give me, I'm just going to give it back. God, if you give me courage, then I'm going to go and be an encourager. God, if you give me peace, I'm going to be the kind of person that tries to bring peace wherever I go. God, if you answer me, then I am going to praise you. It was a prayer of faith. And what's incredible is if you continue to read, it wasn't answered immediately. It wasn't like the heavens opened and everything just changed in the moment. But Hannah changed. When she prayed in her discouragement and she talked to God and she got the assurance that God had heard her, it gave her a peace. It changed everything. Praying in my discouragement brings me encouragement. It's what she found, and it's true for you. I would encourage you today, tomorrow, whenever you have opportunity, keep reading 1 Samuel. It's an inspiring story because Hannah does end up pregnant. And she has a son named Samuel who goes on to become a leader in the nation of Israel. And she has this inspiring prayer in chapter 2 where she thanks God. And what is so fascinating about it to me is, it wasn't, God, thank you for my wonderful husband, or God, thank you for being so good to me. I must be wonderful, and you've really blessed me, and I'm so thankful for that. Or it wasn't even, take that, Penina, see, I got a son too. It was none of those things. It was, thank you, God, for strengthening me. Thank you, God, for loving me. That was her prayer. And you see the depths that happen when you begin to connect with God in these important moments. When things are emotional, when things are out of control, it seems like everything changes when you go to Him. But I also know this about discouragement. Most of the time, it hits first in a moment. You get the news, you find out the story, you hear the results, and it's just, and then it just starts to come in waves. Like you get a little break. It's like the tide coming in. You get a little break, and then here comes some more. And you get a little break, and here comes some more. And I know in my own personal life of the times of deep discouragement, it feels like walking on a slippery floor with slick shoes, right? I mean, you're slipping and you're falling and you get up and you know you're going to slip again and you're just constantly looking for something to hold on to, something to get a hold of. And I want to give you a couple of handrails. I want to give you a couple of things that you can hold on to. The first one, and it sounds a little odd, but it really starts to make sense, is to be sad together. Be sad together. I know that you feel discouraged. I know that you feel sad, but don't isolate. Don't cut yourself off. That just makes it worse. As a church, I can guarantee you, if you come here in your discouragement, we will walk with you. We will not abandon you. We will not leave you. We will love you, and we will walk through it with you. We may not be able to answer it. We can't explain it, and we can't fix it any better than you can. But you won't be by yourself. I remember I was late 90s, early 2000s. I had just finished grad school, which for pastors is called seminary. And the last year of seminary, they spend helping you get ready to find a job because they want you to find a church and get placed in a church. And I started the process and worked it for several months, talked to a lot of places, talked to a lot of people, interviews and resumes and phone calls and videos and just all the stuff. And my first thought was, I'm going to have to choose from all these jobs. But one by one, they kept falling off. And finally, by the spring, there weren't any. And I thought, well, that's odd. I'm sure something will pop up. And I kept talking and working and trying to do the things. And then we graduated, and they said, thank you very much. We're so excited for you. Congratulations, but you're not a student anymore, so get out of student housing. And so we moved out, and we came to Phoenix, myself, my daughter, my wife. We lived in my brother's spare bedroom, embarrassed, frustrated, confused. God, you asked me to do this. I said, yes. I quit my job. I moved across the country. I did all the stuff. And I can't even feed my family now. I don't understand. Was very discouraged. And my old pastor, my original pastor's name is Mark. He kept checking on me. And we talked, and I just kind of explained to him, expressed to him what was going on. And he said something that just got burned in my mind. He said, Brett, we're not going to let you go down. God's got something good for you, and he has not forgotten where he put you. Very simple words. Made a huge difference for me. And it never would have happened if I had disconnected, if I had shut everything off. That's why I say you've got to be sad together. Don't isolate yourself. Don't step into loneliness and add that on top of being discouraged. Second handrail is to believe even when you don't feel. Believe even when you don't feel, and your feelings are real. They're absolutely real, and you need to feel them. And if you're discouraged and you're sad, I'm not telling you to deny that. I am telling you that just because your feelings are real, it doesn't mean they're right. You have to counter them with something. Your emotions, have them, feel them, live them. But you also need to add truth to that. Because truth is always right, and it serves as a fantastic counterbalance to help you. So for some of you, you're feeling discouraged today, you need Psalm 34:18. And you need to read it, and you need to read it again, and you need to keep reading it until you believe it, until you own it, even if you don't feel it. It's very simple. It says God is close to the brokenhearted, and he saves those crushed in spirit. It's an incredible statement. He's close. He's not far. In the middle of your heartbreak and discouragement and despair, he's not far. He's right there. And he saves those crushed in spirit. Maybe you need to hear it again. Maybe you need to say it again. Maybe you need to write it down. Maybe you need to put it on your phone. Maybe you need to repeat it 10 times a day until you believe it. Because your feelings are going to tell you one thing, and I'm not knocking your feelings, but you've got to counter those with truth. Yes, be sad. Yes, be discouraged. But understand that God is close, and he saves those that are crushed in spirit. Final handrail, and it's exactly what Hannah did. Persistently and passionately pray. I know, and I say this all the time, it's not unusual to go to church and hear somebody tell you to pray. This isn't a mindless prayer. This isn't a God, give me a good day. This isn't a God, would you help? This is an honest, God, here's the things I'm upset about. Here's the things I don't understand. Here's the heavy, heavy doubts that I'm beginning to have. Here's the frustration that I'm feeling. And God, here is the heartbreak that has just ruined and wrecked me today. And God, I need you to do the things I can't do. Because I am discouraged, because things are not going well and there's nothing I can do about it. But Jesus, I need you to do the things that you can do. I need you to step into the places that I can't do anything. Because Jesus, I'm trusting you. In the middle of my discouragement, would you bring me courage? It's a powerful prayer. It's much different than bless this food and help us have a good day. It's real, and it's where the relationship begins to change. If you've never prayed this way, I can't encourage you enough to persistently and passionately pray and see what God does. I know many of you are followers of Jesus. If you're a follower of Jesus, you are not immune to discouragement. It comes. It comes all the time. And it chips away at our hope. And it makes us think that we have a right to be bitter. And it allows us to kind of shrug off relationships. And if it lasts long enough, it gets us to the point where we're doubting that our Father loves us. See, we have to deal with it. But the good news is you can deal with it. You can step into it with a passionate, heartfelt prayer, asking God to work, to move, to speak, and to bring you courage in the middle of your discouragement. This morning, we're going to do something a little bit different. As normally, I'll pray at the end of a message, and then we continue our worship. And we're going to pray today, but it's going to be a little different. We're going to listen to a recording of Psalm chapter 42. It is one of the most persistent and passionate prayers that you will find. And if you are here this morning trapped in discouragement, I want to encourage you that the Psalms are songs, but they're also prayers. I want to encourage you to just simply pray along with what you hear. And if you would say today, hey, this is all good to hear, but I'm not particularly discouraged today. I'm glad. I really am. But you probably know somebody that is. You probably have somebody in your life that's in a place of frustration or maybe bitterness, maybe even heartbreak. It's starting to lose hope. You can pray this for them. And so in just a moment, we're going to listen to this, but I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and bow your heads. And it's a little lengthy. It's about 2.5 minutes. But I encourage you, just take that time and take this space to connect with God about your own discouragement or the discouragement that somebody you know feels. And listen to how the people that have loved God and listened to God have dealt with this in the past. So close your eyes, bow your head, and pray along.
As a deer pants for flowing streams, so pants my soul for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? My tears have been my food day and night, while they say to me all the day long, where is your God? These things I remember as I pour out my soul, how I would go with the throng and lead them in procession to the house of God with glad shouts and songs of praise, a multitude keeping festival. Why are you cast down, O my soul? And why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. My soul is cast down within me. Therefore I remember you, from the land of Jordan and of Hermon, from Mount Mizar. Deep calls to deep at the roar of your waterfalls. All your breakers and your waves have gone over me. By day the Lord commands his steadfast love, and at night his song is with me, a prayer to the God of my life. I say to God, my rock, why have you forgotten me? Why do I go mourning because of the oppression of the enemy? As with a deadly wound in my bones, my adversaries taunt me, while they say to me all the day long, where is your God? Why are you cast down, O my soul? And why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God.